Business is no different than fitness. Most people, however, will fail in fitness and will not try hard enough to fail in business. The first time you went into the gym to squat, it probably sucked. And if you're like me, it still sucks. But you showed up every day and every week
and
to get better. But yet we're afraid to post the video online because we don't want to look stupid. However, we'll go in the gym though and look stupid there as a newbie. And the problem too is that once we find success as a coach and trainer in our own physical fitness, we become an expert in the field. And when you're an expert in one field, you don't want to admit fault that you don't know something else. You're not an expert in a different field. And being a great coach and being able to operate a business and get clients are different things.
Let's link up with Krista on The Fix. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
Hey, Fix listeners, welcome back to our latest episode of the Fix podcast. I'm your host, Krista Huber, and I've got another amazing guest lined up for everybody this week, Mike Crowson. He is somebody who just has had a ton of different business experiences in multiple industries. You'll hear a big focus on the fitness industry, but talking about other aspects of it, everything from fitness modeling to supplements, to then even a stint running a coffee company. In this chat, we talk a ton about marketing and the specificity required to really reach your customer. So for anybody out there who is a business owner, this convo is packed with so much value for you. That said, if you are somebody who is looking to challenge themselves, looking to lose the weight, build the muscle, have more energy levels, looking to help you figure out how to step into a position in your life where you truly and fully go after everything you want, you too will enjoy this conversation. It's a really nice balance of being a human being, but also understanding that so much of entrepreneurship really tests what you're able to learn about yourself, how you're able to grow, and why it's known as a very deep dive into self-development and really a test of you building yourself, your character, and everything that comes with that. So I think there's really something in this one for every single person who listens to the show. I'm excited for all of you to check it out, to listen in. Please give us some feedback on it. When we say that, we do really mean it. Mike, I will say, is very kind enough at the end of this conversation to actually do the promotion for me and remind all of you to leave a 5-star review, leave even a comment on the show, whether that's actually on the platform, on Apple, on Spotify, wherever it is that you're listening, but 2, on the social media posts, reply to the story, do something like hitting the emoji to give me a reaction. I love making these episodes, but I do it for all of you. I learn so much from these. I feel like I'm getting such an education. I'm getting exposure to people who are so smart and really learning about different areas that I may not have had the ability to get an hour where I do a deep dive on it, but then I want to pass that on to you. So if there's something you want to hear about, if there's somebody in your life who is a guest who might be a perfect fit for the show, my DMs are always open. Reach out to me if there's a specific topic, a specific viewpoint you'd like to hear my perspective on, a topic you want me to expand on. You all know that I am all ears and I'm really here to serve this audience to help you get even just a little nugget of value from these conversations every single week. I've been thinking about this as we're moving through the new year. The thought that I've been podcasting for 5 years, by this December, we'll reach year 5, and we're so close to episode 200. You know, we're about to have something fun planned for episode 200. So just wait. A little giveaway or something fun for all of you guys for being here for this journey. But feels like every week we're just getting started because there's always something new to consider. There's always a hot take. There's always a fresh perspective and conversation to be able to have. And that's the fun in all of this. And that's truthfully the fun about life when you take the perspective to always be learning, but to actually push yourself to take the step to do the thing that you say you desire, to do the thing that you say that you really want to do. And Mike's own personal journey, his own business journey really, really highlights that. And he just says it so eloquently. So with that, let's welcome Mike Crowson to the FYX podcast. Mike, welcome to the FYX podcast. I would say a long time coming for this conversation, considering the fact that we talked for maybe an hour and a half in our intention to pre-plan for this interview. So I know you have a ton to share, a lot of perspective, a lot of different experiences and hats worn in various businesses. And I think the FYX listeners are in for just such a treat with this conversation. So thank you in advance for your time and for being here and getting the chance to connect with all of us. And I keep it light within the first 30 seconds of the episode, and then we're going to shift gears real quick. Oh. But I'm a big coffee drinker, as I think I shared with you previously. So I love to ask all of my guests, what are we sipping on in the morning to get our day started?
I normally go with a black coffee with half and half. That's like my go-to.
Nice. Keep it super
If I go
simple.
out, I go get a latte, hands down.
Okay. What kind of latte?
I really try to get a vibe for the place. And so if I feel that they have a good house, I'll say, whatever your house is, make me that.
Yeah.
Or what do they like the best? That's typically what I'll go with. Depending on what mood I'm in, I might be like, okay, we'll do that, but let's do half the sugar that you would normally put in it.
Yes. Yes. Important distinction there with the last part of the request. But I like that. You got to, check the vibes. And then that way you're getting the full experience from whatever the coffee shop offers by picking their rec.
Yes, I've obviously learned a lot about coffee, being that I owned a coffee company, but I'm sure we'll dive into that at some point.
Yes, I was going to say you have to include that in your list of all the different things that you can share about your life experience for sure. So I was excited to personally ask you this question. But that said, in us switching into the deep topic immediately, the way I run this show and when I do have a guest on, I know that you've been on other podcasts. I know that we could go right to your Instagram and get a really good sense for who you are, who you're helping, and what your resume is. But I want to go a little bit of a step further. And I want to know, if I were to meet you on the street and I had to ask you not what you do and not who you work with or how you help those individuals, but if I asked you, who are you at your core? And why should we care about what Mike has to say? What are you answering with that?
The first thing that comes to my mind is hard worker. I think that's just because how I was raised. Being in Alabama, working my dad at construction in a farm. So I pride myself on work ethic. And then I think also, just trying to prevent the same mistakes that I made. I think that's the biggest thing I'm out to try to do at this point, is try to help people enjoy the process of entrepreneurship, because it's really hard. It's really hard. And so to have the light on the direction to go, I think is really what people want more than anything. I think real entrepreneurs don't want it handed to them. They just want to make sure that their hard work is going the right direction. And most of the time, just like a New Year's resolution, it's not the person gives up on themselves because their work ethic. It's because they're going really hard in the wrong direction, and the thing that got them the results isn't working anymore. And so what they need is pointed 2 degrees north, because they've been going really hard. But the problem is that once you go 100 miles, 2 degrees is a really big difference on where you're trying to go.
So
it's not that, and you pedal so hard and you become defeated. And that's what typically happens with anything new we're trying to get into, whether that's business or we're trying to see results in the gym and trying to overcome, poor decisions that we've made that got us to where we're at today. And so if I can help just guide somebody to a little bit truer North Star with the things that I've done in the past, then hey, you'll get there a lot faster than it's taken me to get there.
I said this was going to be a good interview, and within the first 3 minutes, we're crushing it. Seriously, though, your point about acknowledging that entrepreneurship is challenging, I think, is especially relevant given the world that we live in today, where you can go on Instagram right now and it looks really shiny and easy, right?
Yeah.
Because there's this perception and what people value and what people then post, that it comes as no surprise to you and me. There are people, especially in the fitness industry, I think this is a common story, who have hundreds of thousands of followers. But if you ask them what their business looked like, let's be candid, it's a bit of a dumpster fire. And maybe there's no ability for them to currently make a living off of it. And that shouldn't have to be their truth, right? That doesn't have to be the case. So because we've alluded to the fact that you obviously have had multiple businesses in different industries and just even your own roots in starting in the gym. And I also think relating to the fact that the way you grew up, like being a part of physical labor, also says a lot about what's probably influenced your perspective on the world today. You can go anywhere you want with this one, but kind of kick us off in talking me through the journey of, being the guy in the gym, then eventually becoming the fitness professional, then eventually starting a coffee business. I'm pretty sure there were supplements in the mix at one point, all the way up to what you now do today for coaches, which we're obviously going to spend a good time talking about.
Yeah. So, man, it all goes back to, I'd probably say whenever I got into bodybuilding, I wanted to turn pro so that I could get a sponsorship and get $250 worth of supplements for free every month. I think that's where everybody's journey begins, right?
Yeah.
This day and age, I'm a little older than a lot of, let's say, people online now, but I would say that now it's like trying to get the Gymshark or the Alpha Elite sponsorship, But back then, like Instagram wasn't really a thing when I essentially started, and personal training 15 years ago in person, I looked over at 4 a.m. at a gentleman that was about 55 at the time, wearing a Smurf shirt, sandals, and sweatpants, long hair, not combed. And I go, is that going to be me? I was like, I hope that's
but
not
it's
me.
True.
And then I realized that if I didn't, and if I didn't change the direction, that was going to be me. I was going to be my dad, who is still working really hard late into his later years of life because we didn't think outside the box or what you could potentially do or how can I make this easier on myself. And so from there, I was getting ready for a bodybuilding show. 3 days out, I want to take some photos so I could show my grandkids one day. That was really the idea behind it. They came out really good. And I posted them online. I got a lot of notice in the Facebook community. I got noticed by a modeling agency out of New York City. And I went and met with him in Atlanta. And then from there, 12 weeks later, I moved to right outside Manhattan in New York City with the idea of like, I'm going to go a different direction in my life. Fitness modeling is not what I thought it was going to be. It's nothing but acting classes. And then you go to all these interviews and whatnot to tell that you're not good enough. Or, you're like a good looking person that's in shape's a dime a dozen in New York City. Right. Or as I could come from Ben in Alabama, like, hey, man, you got a great physique. And it's like everybody up there is eating like apples and granola bars, and I'm in chicken and rice, and they look better than me. And I was like, well, I think I just don't have what it takes naturally to make this happen. So I'm going to change directions. So I started working for a supplement company for 2.5 years, did that. Had an injury and tore a pec in jiu-jitsu after I'd quit my bodybuilding career while I was still pursuing it. My life turned upside down. I moved back to Alabama. Was there 6 months, realized that was a mistake. I actually had a wealthy individual that I had met with said, you need to leave here immediately or you're going to be stuck here. And so I moved to Huntington Beach, California. I was there for 6 months, then had an opportunity to move to Dallas and start a supplement company called Rise Supplements. Most people probably know what that is. I was in that company for about 14 months. At the same time, I'd started the coffee company, Coffee Over Cardio, which I sold a few years ago. But I started 2 companies at the same time. I realized I was like, I want to go with the company I own the most of versus a percentage of another one. Hindsight 2020. That company is now worth, upwards of high 9 figures.
Yeah.
And but I don't regret it because I've loved the journey which I've been on. I just wasn't in the right place at the right time. But I was blessed to have the opportunity. And so I had started the coffee company, went with it. We did about 10 million in sales total, 230,000 orders. Enjoyed the process, learned a lot. However, it wasn't really me. I didn't start drinking coffee like religiously until I'd started the company.
Oh, wow. I don't think you shared that with me.
I was a marketing company.
Yeah.
In my mind, that sold coffee.
That sold coffee. I resonate with that. I get it.
Yeah. And so we had messy bun flavored coffee. I mean, our ideal customer was Starbucks drinking yogurt pair wearing millennial. Like I didn't have to say
as soon as you said messy bun coffee, I was like, I think I would buy that.
Yeah. I mean, we never have to give the name of Heather, but we know what Heather looks like.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Even so much so that our pumpkin spice coffee was called Basic AF. So we went like really niche and narrow into this. And that's where I learned a lot about actually having to speak to your ideal customer and ideal client. And so much so that we would create memes that were like about Target and Starbucks and Taco Tuesday and Margarita. and we could really hone in on our branding, and it was very successful. And then I started a marketing agency at the same time because people would come to us and be like, "Hey, can you help me do what you did for your brand?" I was like, "Sure, $500." And then it was like, yes. And then we raised the price and raised the price, and people just kept saying yes. And then that was another company that was able to do a few million in sales total before I decided to shut it down, which is really when AR essentially came about, which is the company that I focus on now, where we work with online fitness coaches and basically build out automated lead funnels for them. And it's been a wild 2 years. And I shut down everything. I was like, stop the agency, sell the coffee company. I want to go all in on this one thing that's a true passion of mine. Because I was the old trainer that went online and made $12,000 my first year in 2012. And now we have coaches, people do that in a day. And so it's like now the difference of course 15 years ago and now is dramatically different.
Of course.
As hard as it is to create an online business, at the same time, it's never been easier. Gary Vee talks about this all the time. Like, it's never going to be easier than it is today.
It's so true.
And so it's one of those things, like, the sooner you start, the better. The sooner you put yourself out there, the better. The sooner you post the content, the better you're going to become at it. And here we are today. And this week, we just moved into our second office for upgrading. And it's been a wild ride. And man, I don't see us slowing down anytime soon.
That's amazing. And I think there's a lot that stands out there, but I want to first go back to a pivotal point when you had somebody in your life who was obviously a mentor, whose opinion you really valued when you left New York and you moved back home. And I think that this is something that is not talked about enough. And you obviously were able to experience this firsthand. So this is a bit of a two-part question too, in the sense that, one, what was it about that person that made you say, hey, if they specifically are telling me to do this, I'm going to listen? And two, what is it from your experience about the advice of getting out of your hometown, especially because you left, like you had the experience of leaving before, which I think you and I have that in common. But it's kind of unusual. Like most people will go back home if they did go to college or whatever, and then stay and never leave. Whereas for people like you and I, we left, we got a taste of it. We went back for whatever reason and then left again. So I think there's a unique perspective to shed some light on in there about both mentors and just getting out of your hometown.
So the gentleman that I spoke with was actually my best friend and college roommate's father, who owned many businesses. And his advice was that he was gridlocked. And he was like, you're much bigger than this place. And he was like, you're going to get somebody pregnant. And you're going to be stuck here. And he's like, you're not going to be able to truly fulfill the potential in which I think that's in you. Because we fall to the levels of our systems, not the levels of our goals.
Amen.
Atomic habits. Your environment is your system. Who you speak with is your system. The software you use is your system. Like your habits are your system. Like your entire life is a system. And if your entire life is working or is around people that are okay with making 40 grand a year and staying home and never seeing something greater, which nothing wrong with it. However, he just saw me being able to do much more, and he was right. And so that's essentially why I think it was important to me, is because he really, truly knew me and he was successful. And I usually listen to successful people because you've done something I haven't. And what's your biggest advice? Your one piece of advice for me was to get out of town. I'm going to take that. I'm going to listen to it. It wasn't, hey man, you can save a lot of money by being here and you can make a fortune. It was like, I need you to go experience and do more at 25 years old. Like get out of town. So that's what I did. He was like, move to Nashville, move to LA. He's like, go somewhere else. Just don't stay here.
Okay.
And I thought about going to Nashville, but I didn't know anybody. I knew a lot of people essentially in LA. So that's why I went in that direction. And it was good for me. I got to experience a lot. I worked really hard while I was out there trying to build and create, made some good connections, learned a little bit, and got to enjoy some palm trees, which I'm a really big fan of.
That's a good detail too.
And then I think the biggest piece for me on why I listened, I moved back because the injury, and I kind of got burnt at the previous job. because the company essentially took a hit. So I had to take a hit as well.
Okay.
And with the injury, my entire work, how do I word this? My worth has always been in what I've been able to do.
Yeah, especially physically. Like that's why I highlighted the fact that how your childhood was, right?
Right. And so whenever I tore my pec, I knew that I was never going to be the man that I was. I was never going to be able to bench 315 again. And that was just for reference, like 260 pounds. I'm currently like 215. So it was like massive difference of weight that I had because I was trying to pursue bodybuilding. I was in it deep. And so I had to realize that it took me a few years to realize it. But my worth was not in what I accomplished, but in the work ethic it took to accomplish the things. So it wasn't that I was 260. It was the work it took to get to 260. It was all the hours, the dedication. Like that's where the worth lies. Many years of working on yourself to find that out, right? But
I think entrepreneurship can speed that up though, if you take the time to take a step back. Cause I'm like, yeah, I like your timeline of mentioning age 25. Like I was in the same headspace as you where I hadn't quite realized that yet. But then in the last 5 years, I've learned it very quickly because I've been open to it too. Cause that's
there's a magical thing about 30.
Yeah, there definitely is.
When I hit 30, things just changed. And throughout all this time, and I got married and went through a divorce. I'm now remarried again. So it's like, there's a lot of moving pieces that come in developing and building where you're at inside your life. But for me, I think it was just wanting to break the mold, get outside the box and just see what was out there and experience it. Because the truth is, when I came back, I was in a little bit of depressed state and I was kind of like just tucking my tail going back home to some degree.
Sure.
And as much as I had like this great positive outlook, I wasn't around people in my mind that were where I wanted to be. And so I came in thinking, well, I'm going to be the big dog here. And it's like, that's never where you want to be. You never want to be the big dog. Right. Or you actually never realize what a big dog is.
Yeah, that's very well said.
Right. So now living in New York and coming back and then now living in Dallas, like there's some really big dogs in Dallas, And so it just keeps the fire inside me to continue to always become innovative and improve and strive. And be around those like-minded people.
Yeah.
It's hard whenever you leave your town, you'll usually get a taste of something and realize that you don't want to go back. Because once Pandora's box has been opened, it's hard to go. I mean, it's really hard to like eat pizza in Alabama after living in New York. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, come on. I live in New York, so I know. And at one point I've lived in Virginia, so I get that. And when I lived in Virginia, you bet I did not touch pizza there.
Yeah, I mean, like what's tapas in Virginia?
Yeah, exactly. Excuse me. No, it's so true. It's really you're the part, and I've shared this a lot in this podcast. So this is part of the reason why I want to underscore what you just said and echo the sentiment of going home in a way where you felt like you had your tail between your legs, in a way where you felt like, hey, maybe this is to a degree safer. Maybe this being around people that I know really care about me too, because like, let's be real, there's an aspect of living in a really big city when you don't have a network that can get lonely if you choose to make it that way. I think that's an important caveat. But personally, at one point I was living in Charlotte. I had quit my job. The pandemic was like on the verge of just beginning. I realized I was about to marry the wrong person. So I made a lot of big changes all in the span of like a 3-month window. And I really, really deeply struggled with the decision to go home. And I knew it was what was best for me at the time because I was physically really far away from my family. Otherwise, blessed to have actually lived with my younger brother when all of this was going on. And if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't have gotten the push that I needed to tell my parents like, hey, I need some help. But I felt defeated in the sense that when I moved to Charlotte, I originally had this vision of like, oh, I'm never going back. And I had lived in New York at one point. So I felt like being from New Jersey, a lot of people make that move, but I was like, oh, I already experienced that. And when all of these things started happening in the order that they were meant to, while I can now say at 30 years old that everything happens in the order that it's supposed to happen at the exact right time, let's be really clear here, Mike. I certainly sure as hell did not think that in the moment. I was extremely depressed. I was very confused about my future. And I personally really struggled with what you were saying before about identity and you wrapping up your identity in being seen as a bodybuilder. I too did not have the appreciation for like, okay, wait a second. That took a lot of courage to make those decisions. Every time I would tell someone, oh yeah, I broke off an engagement, they'd be like, good for you. And I'd be like, not good for me. Like, because in the back of my head, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm very type A. So I really struggled with that uncertainty. And I've made myself feel very guilty because I kept thinking like, well, I'm not quote unquote allowed to be upset about this because it was my decision. And I'd imagine for you too, like in the moment of actually tearing your pec, there were probably moments where you were like, oh, this is my fault. Like I was doing jujitsu and I like jujitsu, but why did I do that to myself? Like that's the game we play with ourselves, right? So I really deeply resonate with what you said about having been able to grow in a way that you can now acknowledge, like, wait a second, it both is and is not about the hard work, right? Because if you didn't have the hard work, you wouldn't have been able to achieve what you did achieve to even put you on the path, even if it was short lived, for you to get to take your hand at fitness modeling, right? Like that world may have not even been opened up to you. And that obviously shed light on perspectives and different things that you needed. So, in thinking through all of that, the next point in your journey that I'm really curious about, and I have a guess, but I'd rather hear it from you. And my guess is that maybe there was like a little bit of ego involved in some of these decisions. But you mentioned with the decision between the coffee company and with the supplements company, some of that came down to you being like, well, let me stick with the one that I have the most percent ownership of. And you said hindsight's 2020. Obviously, we know Rise, we know the success that it's had. I think most people who listen to this podcast know what it is, right? So I'd be curious for you, just like kind of unpack that phase and, you know, reflect on that point and your reasons for making that decision and maybe what you'd go back and like tell what Mike in 2025 knows now.
Yeah. No, totally. There's one thing you did say though, before I dive into that.
Yeah, please.
Was I've never been the person that self-sabotaged. I've never been like, why did you do that? You're such an idiot. Like I never felt like negative spoke to myself. I felt like I had enough of that growing up to some degree.
Okay.
I always felt like I am enough. I am good. I always felt like I had to prove it.
Yeah.
And so I never had the doubt that I wasn't there.
Yeah.
It just went into worrying about what was next.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. You summed that up perfectly. Like
so
I was always like,
it was like
this struggle
I'm
of
not
confidence,
an idiot
right?
for getting a divorce, but what am I going to do at 32
next?
divorced?
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. I get it. And I was only 25, so it really didn't even matter.
Yeah. So it's interesting what we tell ourselves. That's the biggest piece is like, it doesn't matter what someone else says. If you don't believe it, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And that's where like, I think what you tell yourself and what you say out loud is so important. Huge. So important. I'm a really big believer in that. I can think what I want, but if I say it, then it comes true.
Yeah. The mirror theory. Do you know that one? That's basically what that is. It's like the idea. I did a post on this recently because a lot of people have been talking about this on social media, thanks to the likes of people like Mel Robbins and her theory of like, just let people do what they want to do and it'll show you things. So the mirror theory is essentially what you just mentioned of your words are like spells in the sense that whatever you believe internally, whether you even say it out loud or whether you keep it to yourself, it's the way that you see the world. So those thoughts get reflected back around you. Like the idea that if you operate from a place of lack, you will always feel that there's something lacking. Whereas if you can rewire your brain and train it to look for abundance, you are going to see that kind of abundance. So it's like the world at your version of reality. And we could get a little meta with this and say that everyone has a different version of reality, right? But like your specific version of reality is representative of what is going on for you inside. So it's like a mirror of your inside.
Got it. So there's also something I think that's like, if I can't control what I say out loud, how in the world am I going to control my thoughts?
Great question. Very good point.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
You want me to change what I think, but I can't control what I say?
Right.
If you can't control what you eat, how can you control what you think? So it's like your outside actions are the first thing that have to be changed before you can change the inside actions.
Very true.
At least that's my beliefs.
Yeah.
Because like I don't always have the best thoughts, but
No.
my actions are what are most important to getting to where
Right.
I want to go.
Right. We have like 60,000 thoughts a day, I think, something crazy
Yes.
like that. And I think
Yeah.
women are actually more than men.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, it's some like wild number. So to your point, it's like, yeah, not every thought, and that's why I like theories like this, because I think it helps us delineate between not talking about toxic positivity and things like that. Because it's to say that, yeah, of those 60,000 thoughts, we're probably going to have a couple that aren't really serving us. And that doesn't mean that every last thing we think has to serve us all the time, but it's the ability to be aware of what's coming up for you enough to then potentially make the different choice, right? Through those actions like you're describing.
Positive or toxic positivity. I just have a struggle
Such a
getting
crazy
behind
term.
that only
Yeah.
from the sense of if there's action followed.
Mm.
So I say this all the time. A wish is nothing more than a positive complaint.
I
Because
like that. I've never heard that.
well, it's because I just made it up one
I
day.
like it.
So wish is nothing more than a positive complaint because if you really wanted it, you would devise a plan to get it. If you wish
Sure.
for it, you're just saying it but not doing anything about it. That's complaining.
Fair.
Whether it's positive or negative, it is still a complaint of why you're not where you want to be. Or, well, I wish I had that card. And it's like, well, have you devised a plan to get it? Or are you still doing X, Y, and Z? Right? Versus like, I wish I didn't have to go to work. And it's like, so are you looking for a different job or are you
Yeah,
just
like what are you doing
complaining
about it?
Right.
Right. For sure.
So I'm really big on wants and actions because I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I mean, I made a 21 on my SAT. Like I'm not the smartest guy in the world. My grammar is terrible, and this accent is really good compared to what it used to be.
I was about to ask you at some point in this conversation between
Yeah,
living
I
in New
posted a
York
video
and
on my
California,
Instagram.
like I think you didn't lose it. I'm impressed. But now
Well,
I want to hear the old
this
one.
is definitely lost.
That's
Because
so
I
funny.
posted a video actually yesterday on my Instagram of me when I was 21
Oh,
filming
I'm gonna go watch
videos
it.
in my car.
Yeah.
And at 21, I said that nothing is not achievable. It's just what are you willing to sacrifice to get there. So I've always had the mentality of just work harder, just work harder. I've come to learn that working hard is great. However, you need to work different if you want to achieve different types of goals.
Sure.
But I digress. Going to the rise
Yeah.
piece and the coffee piece. For me, I felt that I'd be able to make more money if I owned it because I get all of it. Even if they did the same, even if the other company did more money, I would still make more on my own because it was mine. So that was essentially my approach. And when I came into that situation, I was still doing phone sales for other fitness coaches and IFBB pros and trying to close deals for them.
So you were in like a high ticket remote
Building
closing kind of
websites.
thing? Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah. And that's because like I didn't have an income. And so I had to work while I'm trying to start two companies. One I'm funding and one I'm essentially not having the fun, but work.
Yeah, we know how that is over here. I get it.
So I'm like over here, like three things going on. And it's like, I got to cut one. Which one's going to be the one that's going to pay me the least amount of money that I need, that can be cut? It's the one that's got the most potential.
Gotcha.
So I cut the one that had the most potential so that I could eat today.
Yeah, I get it. But that's very real. And that's why I wanted you to go into this because at first when I heard it, I was like, was that just more of like a pride thing or was there other circumstances? And I kind of guessed there might be other circumstances surrounding it, knowing you.
Yeah. I mean, I was called to ask to make a decision.
Yeah.
So I made one. I made it for myself.
Sure.
But just to give a reference. So I've been in a lot of, I make this funny thing all the time. I talk to my teammates here at AR and I was like, I don't want to hear how hard you got it. Because let me tell you a story. When I moved to New York, I lived with 10 strangers in a duplex in Jersey City. And I was catering. So I had to like walk over homeless to come home, shoveling to get my car out of the street, having to share washing machine with strangers, and dryer, having to share the kitchen, fridge. Like my bathroom was in a closet that was makeshift in where I was living, all to just follow a dream. Then come back in 2017 and I started the coffee company. I moved to Frisco, Texas, where I'm currently at now, right north of Dallas. I would go from like 9 to 5 working at Rise, packing all the orders, doing all the things. I would leave, go to the gym, come home, and then pack coffee orders inside my apartment. I was on the second story and I learned how to print t-shirts. So I was screen printing t-shirts.
All from this apartment?
In my living room on top of plastic laid on the ground.
Oh my gosh.
So that ink and paint wouldn't get on the floor.
Yeah, I was going to, that's why I'm like, in your apartment, this is messy.
I had a 4-color single station in the middle of my living room.
Oh my gosh.
Where I would also make the screens, which have to be done in a black light room.
Yeah.
And then pressure washed out. So I would run a pressure washer in my bathtub.
Oh my god.
Black light where I would basically unscrew all the bulbs and turn it on. And I had the water running from one of those scrunch hoses coming as a split valve off the washer and dryer.
Did your neighbors know you were doing that in there?
No, of course not. But I would also try to be like, it would sound like a really loud vacuum basically, but I would try to like do it really fast and then cut it off.
Yeah.
But try to do it as soon as I got home so it wasn't like too loud or too crazy late at night.
Oh gosh.
But it's just a process of trying to make it happen.
Yeah.
Didn't have all these things. It was just like, my dad always told me, you'll always just figure it out. And I've always just went with that mentality. I don't know how, but I'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. I'll just figure it out. What other option do you have? There was no quitting. I don't know what corporate job means. I never had a corporate job. My dad didn't work one. I didn't know what an accountant was since I was in a junior in high school. Like, I don't know what jobs are. Didn't know that was an option. It was, I was going to be a plumber or a carpenter or something with my hands. And the fact that I don't have calluses on my hands is a blessing. Because that's how I was raised.
Right.
And so to get out of that mold, but also see that's like, I really don't know what it's like to be a waiter. I've never done it. I don't know what it's like to open or close a store or fold a piece of clothing at a retail store. I don't know what customer interaction looks like. I don't know what a boss looks like, except for that 2.5 years I worked at a startup company. And so for me, it's just been completely different than most. Not saying that that's the best.
No, that's just
a lot of things I didn't learn. I didn't get to experience customer service.
Yeah, fair.
So when I receive an email from somebody, I'm like, oh my God, they hate us.
But I appreciate
versus like, oh, you've never had somebody as you're a waiter say something just nasty.
Be like, this wasn't my Diet Coke.
Right. Things like that. You don't get the thick skin,
True. That's true.
So there's a lot I missed out on, but not that I regret it by any means, but it definitely would have helped me.
Sure.
For sure, in some capacity.
Yeah.
But for me, going through that transition of like trying to figure out what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it was just risk it for the biscuit is something that I always used to say. Just go for it. Every time I moved to LA and New York, I didn't have a job. I was like, I'll just figure it out. I don't know, but I'll figure it out. I never had any worries about if I was going to figure it out. I always had worries that were like a year, 2, 3 years in advance. And I don't know why per se, but it was just always like, I just don't know what the future is going to hold, but I can show up today. That I can definitely do. It's just for what's to come, what's next, what's going to be the big break, where am I going to make my money? When am I finally going to have all this pay off and I'm going to make it?
Yeah.
It took me 10 years to make 6 figures.
And I think that's one of the hardest parts. And like I was just saying a moment ago, I appreciate you being candid about that, but also being able to acknowledge, like, in a lot of ways, you had some really challenging experiences and they were different for certain reasons, but you also recognize how, because you only had the exact experiences that you did, there were things that you kind of missed out on. But I find like a lot of comfort in some of what you said, because let's use the example of like the customer service email. knowing what you've been able to accomplish for yourself as you've gone through all of these things, as you've had the uncertainty, to hear that even at the point you were at today, that you'll get that email and still have that reaction, I think is a really good reminder for any entrepreneur out there. If you're early in your journey, if you feel like this is the wrong label, but like midway in your journey, right? And you just also saying too, like, hey, it took me 10 years to get to six figures. Because another thing that I think you're the perfect person to ask this and comment on, there's way too much talk, especially in the fitness industry, of these different tiers of like figures that we can make. The first one we all know is like, get to your first 10K month, get there. And it took me like 4 years to make that happen. And then once I did get there, what I never knew was how much easier it would be to get to each next step. In the sense that like, I was like, oh, if this took this long, is the next step going to take that long? Right. And obviously you just learn more information, but going to this slightly bigger picture of saying, hey, like six figures, my take is this. And I want your perspective as a former, the whole personal trainer track too. I believe that a lot of this stems from the fact that you take a typical personal trainer who, like what you described of your experience 15 years ago, you see them in your 20 something, you see them in their 50s, and you see the fact that they may have a couple kids and they're still waking up every day at 4 a.m. trying to train 10 sessions in a day just to be able to be, maybe not like really build wealth, but just to be able to make a living, right? So I understand very objectively why at some point, whether it was, in the mid, like 2013, 14 kind of year range, and then obviously extreme, like exploded during the pandemic, I understand where the attraction came from to be like, oh, 10K feels like a good number. And then therefore six figures feels like a good number. Because if we just took the average of like what a typical personal trainer makes, for anybody listening to this who really doesn't know, it can be a big range depending on the gym and the split. But what I always tell my clients is like, yeah, sometimes you're paying $100 for a session. And I was lucky if I saw $50, and they would hear that and they'd be like,
50. That's crazy, because most of the time you're getting paid like 17, 18
like,
an hour.
That was like very lucky. And so then I would explain to them, I'm like, you don't know how, because it would come up because like they would see the training is expensive. And then I would say to them, you have no idea, like for other trainers in certain gyms, there's also no guarantee, like you eat what you kill. And just to paint that picture, right, of like the client would then say to me like, oh my gosh, why are we even training here? Because I want you to be able to make that income.
Yeah.
And that's what's, and it's very typical. It's very standard. So that's my thought process of like where this then, let's call it like marketing for fitness coaches, to be like 10K is the number. And then eventually six figures is the number. But what's your perspective on that? Because you've been doing this longer than me. And especially because of what you do for AR today and like the role that you really fill for coaches, I think you'd have a lot to say on this.
So just to give some perspective, here's the context. So we work currently with coaches that are either just starting out, or we have coaches that do 200,000 a month. There's a wide variety.
Huge range.
Huge range, right?
Huge. Yeah.
We find that once you hit 10, you catch a stride. I've always said this, and I guess I can just say this now. It's really easy to make $1 million. It just takes 10 years to become the person it requires to make $1 million. You have to go through the process to learn. Business is no different than fitness. Most people, however, will fail in fitness and will not try hard enough to fail in business. The first time you went into the gym to squat, it probably sucked. And if you're like me, it still sucks. But you showed up every day and every week
and did
to get better. But yet we're afraid to post the video online because we don't want to look stupid. However, we'll go in the gym though and look stupid there as a newbie. And the problem too is that once we find success as a coach and trainer in our own physical fitness, we become an expert in the field. And when you're an expert in one field, you don't want to admit fault that you don't know something else. You're not an expert in a different field. And being a great coach and being able to operate a business and get clients are different things. So whenever you are below that, let's say 5K mark in sales, it becomes difficult to admit you don't know what it is you're doing. And you're like, I'm a great coach. And you're like, that's true. That's also irrelevant.
Yeah. No, it's
Right?
that's
McDonald's
the
don't
most
make the
important
best
distinction.
burgers, but they sell the most of them.
Very, very good analogy. Yeah.
Okay. So they're really great at business. And the
Right.
biggest problem is most of us try to run our business like we're McDonald's.
Mm-hmm.
We basically want to sit back and be a cashier. We think I'm going to build a website and people are just going to come pay me. It's like, well, that's not how that works. And the reason it doesn't work is because you don't have the branding that McDonald's has.
Right.
Like I talked about this at the GHL event. Like you ain't got it like that. You don't
Yeah.
have the golden arches that
No.
attract people in off the street.
Yeah.
You don't have the branding yet. You're still new. And no one knows that you're a great coach because you don't post about it. And you don't want to post about it because either A, you feel like you look stupid because you probably do because it's brand new, just like you were starting to squat for the first time in the gym. Or you have this mentality of like, well, I'm not going to give away all my good stuff for free.
Mm.
And it's like, so you're not going to tell people that you know what you're talking about. You're just going to want them to assume they know what you're talking about. Because if you don't tell me you know how to do something, how do I know? Because I work with all these people. Where are they at? Have you posted about them? Oh, you post once a week and you think that's good enough. It's like volume wins. And you're like, well, these other coaches, you know, there's just these kids out here just posting whatever and they just making tons of money. And it's like, you mean they're getting in front of people, building trust, talking to people. The same thing you do in person, which is why you have a successful in-person business. However, you don't take that same approach online. You got to view that just because you're a big deal in your gym is because you made it a purpose to be a big deal in the gym. You wanted to shake everybody's hand. You wanted to speak up and get people to know you. And the online world, you have to treat it also like a brand new gym. What are you doing to say hello? What are you doing to showcase you know what you're doing? And that's where the real energy comes in, is like, how much effort are you putting into growing the business?
Right. And like you said, it is truly a different skill set. I think it's interesting to draw the contrast between the fact that like, hey, you've become this expert in something, so therefore it does get tougher to admit when you're not an expert in this other aspect. And look, like I could have like a whole 2-hour podcast with you just on the branding aspect alone. But for me, that's one of the reasons why I actually feel I didn't know it at the time. Like I had no idea that this decision would serve me the most as much as it does today. But I'm really happy that the 14, 15, 16-year-old version of myself who was so in love with journalism and communications and marketing pursued that major all the way through college, because whenever anybody asks me about my business, I never talk to them about fitness and nutrition, and they get a little surprised. And then when I break it down for them, I'm like, well, I'm not talking to you about the fitness and nutrition aspect because that just happens to be the subject matter that I like. But inside of that, we have to think about, how do you talk to that person specifically? How do you show up? And, you know, just as this is a tangent, we can kind of like put a pin in and come back to so that you can talk about like this income piece. But something that I realized recently in giving advice to somebody just newer to starting out in their business that you answered so well just now is the parallels between what you would do in person versus what you would do online should be almost the same. And yet somehow, because of instant gratification, the nature of technology and like the phone screens between us, if you really think about it, like the way some people behave online when they DM you, if they did that to you in person, it would be the weirdest interaction you've ever had in your life. And we forget that. So the advice that I like to give people is like, if you're going to send someone a DM, how would you talk to them if you were face to face? How would you talk to them if you were recording this podcast? You wouldn't dump like 17 minutes worth of nutrition knowledge on them and then expect them to want to buy your coaching. You also wouldn't be like, hey, my name's Chris. It's really nice to meet you. I'm a fitness coach and let me sell you this thing. Like that would just be the strangest thing ever. So I think that's a big part of it. And you said that so well, but please continue on your point just about like the environment and the, you know, inputs that go into it.
Yeah. So I think that's the biggest piece of advice I can give is before you text, say it out loud. Would you say that to the person standing in front of you? If not, you probably shouldn't send that text message.
Yeah.
And I think that's because like, how many people send text messages that start with hi? But for some reason, whenever we feel like we need to get into a sales mode, that's what we do. It's like all of a sudden you go corporate and it's like, you didn't build your business on being corporate. You built your business on being you.
And
But
interesting for you
why
to
should
point
we
out such a
change
small
that?
word. Like it's as small as a word like that. It can have a huge impact. You had mentioned that to me a couple weeks ago. And I was like, yeah, that's actually a great point.
The whole thing that I taught at the GHL event was cash is in the connection. We always hear like you need to send emails, you need to send texts, you need to have these follow-ups and all this stuff. Yes, that's all true. However, what you say in those is more important about than when you send it.
Fair.
And so for me, like I told you, I'm not the smartest one in the room, but I can build a better connection, I feel like, than some people. And I can do it by understanding that me not being perfect in grammar is to my benefit.
Mm.
If everything that I send you is perfect, then it shows that I'm not human.
Yeah.
And or you're already slightly insecure because the number one thing attached to fitness is insecurity.
Right.
And so if you're perfect in what you say and you look perfect, and it's like, how are you going to work with me? Because I'm just a big old idiot. I don't like what I see in the mirror. How are you going to like it? Right. And so the way I try to take this approach is like purposely misspelling words, followed up by the correct, or not focusing on having a colon in my sentence. Right. Like just be you. And like sending multiple messages versus one big long one. Right. Again, say it out loud, but also if you're texting your buddy, texting your girlfriend, how would you text it? That's how you communicate with people online, because that's what you would do in person. And that's what helps you build the business. You want to build a connection? Be their friend first, help them second, and the money will come.
Yeah.
The moment that you posting, expecting to make money from the post, you have lost the concept of actually building the connection.
Yeah. It's the wrong energy.
So when you make the post that says, hey, man, I'm looking for 5 people to do X, Y, and Z, you're coming off trying to sell instead of help, which is why no one's going to reach out. And if they do, it's because you just started, and then it's not going to work anymore. And then you're going to double down on it because it used to work, but now it doesn't. And then you're going to say, Instagram's shadow banning me. It's just, I've heard it a million times.
Yeah. So have I. That's why I'm laughing.
But it's really nothing more than just building the connection and, you know, helping somebody. The more you can help them, the more they'll pay you in long term. Like we give away everything for free. I tell you what to do and how to do it. The difference is that 90% of you ain't going to do anything with it.
And I'm going to say, because I'll be a good student over here, and just to reiterate your point of connection, when Mike first reached out to me, I think it's important for the listener to hear this context. I also think it's fun to like share how the podcast actually happens, because I think, you know, there's not a lot of like the sauce being made. And I actually think that's a really fun part of the journey and bringing people into that. So Mike sent me a message. He mentioned to me that he saw my podcast, saw what I was doing with my coaching, and was like, hey, I'd love to just chat sometime, and was more than gracious to be like, let's jump on a call. And a lot of times I get DMs from people just like assuming that they can come on my podcast. And I'm like, well, first of all, like, I don't know you. I don't know if you're like what you're trying to talk about really resonates with my audience. And perfect example, like I even said to you, I was like, hey, it looks like based on your business, I want to be clear that I have a big variety of listenership for the show. Some are coaches, but a good 50% isn't. Does that still work for you? Mutual like understanding of what we're bringing to the table. But more importantly, we then got on a call that I mentioned was a long time. And part of the reason why that was a long time is because you really did get to know me. We had a very candid conversation about my own business. And you were nice enough to pull up one of my landing pages, give me feedback on it, and recommended that I turn something into a video instead of text. I have done that on every landing page since, and we only had that conversation like 3 weeks ago. It took me 5 minutes to shoot it. I used AI to make my script even better than it could be. And after this call, one of the things I'm planning on doing is just editing it down a little bit so it's tighter so that it can now go up on the page. I have had that page for 6 months, and I could have done it months ago. But look, we're human, stuff comes up. All that to say, though, it's true. Like you gave me potentially one piece of information that took us like 10 minutes to really talk about that could easily convert thousands of dollars in my business. And that's not lost on me. So thank you for doing that. And just know that I did actually take the action.
I love the fact you took action. That's the most important.
I appreciate it.
Me.
Thank you.
Because I think for me, there's advice. I mean, you can learn anything you need to
Of course.
ChatGPT is an amazing tool.
Yeah.
But it's like, for the listeners, it's like, what are you taking action on?
Mhm.
Here's the thing. You got a goal, but you don't do anything with it, or you're trying to lose weight, and there's a part of you that has this brief window of effort, and you don't take action, or you stop taking action, and you don't continue through. As much as you want to achieve that goal for that brief moment, you didn't. And when the quicker you realize that it's not because you suck, it's because for that moment you stop caring. And when you think of it from that perspective, it's like, okay, so do I actually want to achieve this goal? And if I do, let me get back on the horse. Let me think about my decisions before I do anything with them. Let me be proactive instead of reactive to everything I do, because this is the goal that I want to choose, because this is the person I want to become. And for me to become that person, I got to take actions. I got to take the right actions. And so something I just love about this idea of what I call the purple dinosaur, and I stole this from a good friend of mine, the purple dinosaur. If I say something or somebody says something that makes you feel a certain type of way, you should write that down. And it's either something you need to do more of or stop doing. And so for myself, let's say somebody says something about how, what they feel that they do as a husband is really important. And I go, man, you don't have to do that. That made me react, which means I need to take mental note of why I reacted to that. Was it because of jealousy?
Ooh.
Was it because of ego? Like, what made me react to that way of you saying that? That's a purple dinosaur to me. I need to investigate that. Or when somebody says something, I go, that's really good. I should take note on that. Like, it's the same thing, what you need to do or stop doing. And so every time something makes you feel some type of way, it's for a reason. Subconsciously, your body's going ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
And so by me just mentioning it made you feel some type of way. And you're like, you know what? I am going to take action on that. And then you essentially did it. So if it didn't make you feel some type of way, which means you wouldn't have believed it.
Right.
If you didn't want to change it, then it wouldn't have made you feel like you needed to. But the fact that it did and you took action on it, which is why you're able to continually find success, because you go with your instinct instead of disregarding how something makes you feel. You take action on how you feel and you will see results in anything that you do in life.
Yeah, it's so true. And just to bring that fitness and nutrition analogy back into it, this is something I spend a lot of time with my fitness and nutrition clients, obviously working predominantly with females. I think this is something that making the emotional tie really clear for them, because we recognize that that's where the effort moments, that's where some self-sabotage moments can come from. And it's to the point where, for me, a guiding principle that all of our Fitness Fix clients learn is, if we can actually master our emotions, meaning like the relationship that you have to your emotions, or what you're really describing and saying, like moving into a state of action, that is more of the secret to fat loss than what the heck should the ratio for my macros be. Because what are the times when we don't want to follow our macros? It's the scenario of, you had a really long day. One of your kids you had to pick up from practice. You were late for something else. You didn't defrost the chicken that was in the freezer. Like, those are real moments. But the version of you that hasn't been able to accomplish the end result that you desire before, that version of you didn't have the capacity to deal with that emotion a little more neutrally, or follow through on the game plan of like, nope, I told myself that I was going to hit my macros for today. And thankfully, like, I have something else that I can defrost really quickly, or I happen to have like tuna in the pantry that I can use. The thing is, if we tie this back to like the marketing piece of all of this, that's not always as sexy to market. But one of the tips that I would give to people is, if you are a coach listening to this and you do want to find a way to market that, there is a way to make it sexier. In the example that I just gave was super freaking specific. And so the woman looking at your content who's like, yep, I've been the mom who was late for this, who then didn't have the dinner ready, and then she decided to order pizza. She's like laughing to herself, like, how did she get inside of my brain?
Yeah. It's speaking your ideal client's language, because if you try to help everybody, you're going to help nobody.
Yeah.
I give you the best example. My coffee company. Let's go back to Heather.
Yep.
If I made a bland branded coffee, Heather wouldn't identify with it and she wouldn't get it. But neither would Mark either.
True.
Or John or Susan. No one would identify with it because we buy things off of how they make us feel. Do I feel that this is cute and fun and I want to be a part of it? Or do I feel that Black Rifle is, gun ho, America, prideful, like patriotic? That's what I feel when I grab the bag. Like, how do you feel when you're talking to somebody or somebody's talking to you? If I said I help businesses, it doesn't hit as hard if I said I help online coaches.
Right.
And so when you say this is how everybody loses weight, everybody just hears it. But when you get very specific that I help nurses that work 12-hour shifts that have long days and have people around them that react to stress instead of being proactive to it, you go, yeah, everybody at my work's terrible.
Right.
And you go, that's me. Wait, how did you know that?
Yeah.
And so the more you can speak to a very specific person, the more that your content will hit, the more that it will speak directly to them, the more people will inquire and be like, you get me. And when somebody says, you get me, you're speaking to the right person. If somebody says, hey, that's not me, that doesn't mean change your brand.
It means they did you a favor, that they're not the person for you to
market to. Not your ideal client.
And that's okay. Yeah.
So the more specific you can get, like I help women that are 35 plus with PCOS, it's like perfect.
Right.
Like, here we go. I'm a specialist in perimenopause, right? Because if you're struggling with going into perimenopause or going into menopause, you want to work with somebody that specializes in it.
Of course.
Right. And so it's kind of the same concept where it's like you work with people that are trying to lose a ton of weight or people trying to do a show. You can't serve both.
No.
You can't have Becky, you post, she doing 5-pound side laterals, who's a mom of two that needs to lose 35 pounds. And then you training Mark, who's trying to go D1. Because Becky views you training Mark squatting 400 pounds and go, I don't want to be big and bulky. I don't want to look like that.
Yeah.
Vice versa. Mark's going, but you can't help me go D1. So you're over here training this old lady. Even though we know as trainers, we can help both. However, it's not about what you think. It's about what they think.
Yeah.
And so you want to tell people what you do and how you do it, because you're not going to like the assumption they have to make if you don't tell them.
Yeah. So true. And I love it just on this thread of being consistent with this message, but also being specific. I would imagine as we relate that back to your career decisions and your path, you've obviously seen the value of choosing to really focus in on different things. Mm-hmm. And, you mentioned that at the very beginning of this conversation and talking about like, shut down the marketing agency to kind of bring us all the way up to where you've been for the past 2 years. And you'd even shared with me, at one point, like you had certain clients in other industries or you were entertaining it and you were like, wait a second, I don't know that I can help this person. Like I could, but it's distracting from the bigger goal. Correct. So I'd love for you to connect that point back to how you've made some more recent decisions in like the last 18, 24 months, because obviously that's a guiding principle for you.
Yeah. Essentially what happens is more money, more problems. And what I mean by that is that let's go back to the 10K mark. Mm-hmm. Once you get to 10K, realistically, probably 70% of your people are going to fit a mold.
Yep.
Of some degree. And then the more people you take outside of that mold, the more you're actually distracting yourself from going all in on that specific avatar, that specific mold. So you're still trying to create vague content that doesn't speak to just that person. So you're still helping men and you're posting about men. However, 70% of your people you work with are women going through menopause. And so your content doesn't really hit and you're not able to truly get there. So now you're building programs that are vastly different. You're making content that are vastly different. Your group calls that you're having are more vague instead of being able to dive specifically in on a topic. You can't get really good at getting really good at the one thing because you're spreading yourself still too thin. Because it's hard to go from one call talking about building muscle to another call talking about female hormones. Like,
right.
Even though you can be knowledgeable, but what are you spending your spare time in learning?
Right, because you got to go deeper on one of those things.
Exactly. Yeah. And so for us, it's kind of the same concept of going deeper into that hole of, okay, so I can help local business and I can help e-com because that's where I came from, and I can do all these other little things. However, how can I do my best? So when you have multiple businesses, 3 of them, you only can give 33% of your energy to each. I don't care what you say, that's the reality. Just like you can't do a bodybuilding show and run a marathon and be the best at both. Like, we need to pick one, right? We can't build muscle and get shredded to the maximum capabilities on both, right? They're both going to suffer.
Picturing a bodybuilder trying to run a marathon.
Yeah. So it's going to be me trying to hike Mount Kilimanjaro when I leave on Sunday.
Oh, right. That's this weekend, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So for us, it was like, hey, I'm going to cut off all distractions.
Okay.
If you're like, and I wear this coach every day to see it as a reminder to don't get distracted. Don't get distracted. Money's green. And I implore that in the beginning, if you're not doing 10K, collect all money from everybody of every niche. In time, you get to where you start saying no more and more and more and more. And so now I will not distract my team with people outside the coaching niche. I will only consult them with my time if the money's worth it. Otherwise, no. And the reason is that it makes the team distracted. It gets them off kilt. So it's like, well, wait, what are we doing with this person? Like, I want no questions asked about a client in that nature, right? They need to be, it's very specific. And then it also makes it to where all the content that's created speaks only to those problems and pain points, like only to them. Because if I go back talking about my coffee experience, how does that help coaches?
Right.
It helps e-commerce, which is great.
Not unless you find the analogy, and that's the only way to do it.
If I can't turn it into something,
right,
then it becomes irrelevant. Yeah. And so this is a great example of that. If you don't want to work with competitors, stop posting about you doing a show.
Right.
Your profile picture doesn't need to be you on stage. Those are your passions. Those are things you love. But what's the message that we're putting out? Who are we trying to attract? We're trying to attract people that want, general population that want to lose weight and just become their best selves, or people that are trying to be the best they can be and that also be better than everybody else, because those are 2 different people, right? And so your content's going to speak differently. And so for myself, just getting really narrow has allowed us to actually dig a deeper hole instead of just going wider. And you'll find that when your business, it's a lot like a funnel, to where you start here and then you get a little bit more narrow and a little bit more narrow and a little bit more narrow. And I'm the person that's always been, shiny object syndrome as an entrepreneur. Is like, let me focus on this, like whatever pays me, like, let's do that. And my partner Baker has just been so adamant about like, hey, just this. Hey, just this. And I'm like, yeah, but this person will pay us 5 times the money because their business is 5 times bigger. And he's like, yes, but it's also 5 times the work. And we have to learn a whole new thing to make it work. I'm like, yeah, I got it. And it's like, I'm taking myself out of the driver's seat now and I'm being a passenger to the business.
Right.
And so just getting really narrow on what it is you want to accomplish will help you get there 10 times faster. And again, business is no different than fitness. So if you want to achieve a fitness goal, then you need to pick one specific fitness goal. Can't do both. You can. It's just not going to be as quick and it's not going to be as optimized or optimal to get there. Because again, you can't bench press the most and be the leanest at the same time. Yeah. Yeah. My ladies out there, you can't have the biggest booty and have shredded abs at the same time. Like, we've got to have an understanding of what are we trying to accomplish.
Right. And I actually just had this conversation in my group call with my clients earlier this week, because we were talking more about like pulling macro tracking itself and like your precision with macro tracking, like a lever, right? And like maybe you're cranking it because you're in the middle of a deficit and you want the result as quickly as possible because you operate from the place, well, like, let me just get in and out of this deficit real fast. But occasionally, and this very much speaks to my niche of the type of person I support, as if they're a mom, if they also run a business, if they are also a partner, a friend, a sister, all these different hats that they wear, sometimes it doesn't really make sense for us to approach a deficit that way. So for some people, that has led them down this path of asking me the question of like, what should my relationship to food tracking be? And how do I want it to fit into my life long term? Right. And the biggest thing I always tell them is, personally, like, I really think about this of when's the actual optimal time for us to be in that deficit so that we can do it pretty quick and just get in and out of there. But my role as a coach is to show you that you could pick two other paths and there's two other ways that we could do this. But you have to understand the biggest consequence, and it might not be a consequence to you, so that's why I'm putting this in quotes, is that the end result may take a little longer. So if you're like, I'm not here to track my food to a T and make sure that I nail my macros within 10 grams every day, then just recognize that if there's a person inside of my program who loses 20 pounds and you're still 5 to 7 pounds in, you got to come ask me what their behavior looks like, because I'll show you the receipts and I'll put up those receipts right away.
I love that. It's just expectation. If you're willing to give, if you're going to give 70%, you're going to get 70% of the results. If you're willing to give 90, you will get there 20% faster, right? And so I view it from this standpoint. When you said, you know, what you had just mentioned, the first word that comes to my mind would be consistency. If you're consistent at anything, that's, to me, that's where you start. And it's on anything in life. Posting, just be consistent. How much? Whatever you can be consistent with. Trying to lose weight? Great. Be consistent. What are your macros? It doesn't matter right now, but can you be consistent with what those macros are? Then you can make adjustments. Because if you can't have the discipline and learn to be consistent, it doesn't matter what you eat today if you rebound tomorrow. And this is where the yo-yo becomes. It's lack of consistency. And I always state, I run this rule in everything that I do, 80%. If it's 80% of what I want, go for it. Do it full send, baby. Because 80% will get you in the right direction. 100 and 0 will get you nowhere.
Right.
And so if you can just always lean on the good side, then or the good side being what is you want to accomplish, just always lean there. One more decision in the right direction will get you results. So when the things don't go right and you're the busy mom who has to pick up their kid from soccer practice and you don't have the food prep because you didn't take the due diligence to make that happen, there's always a decision to be made. And you can either have the discipline to make the best decision possible, which is going to err you on the 80% rule, versus going, I'm going to make a 0 decision and just stop by McDonald's. But even then, what did you order at McDonald's? Did you get just the patty? Or did you also get the large fry? Like, every decision you make, you get to decide, is it all or nothing, or is it 80%? Mm-hmm. And if you'll show up in your life making those decisions that just are not perfect, very clear, not perfect. But if you err on the side of caution of good, then it's impossible for you to not see results. I didn't say you had to be perfect. Yeah. You just have to err on the side of good.
Yeah. I've been saying to my clients this week, along the same lines of this conversation, was I put this in an email. I put this in a post that I did on Instagram yesterday on my Fitness Fix page. Perfect is the enemy of getting shit done. And if you're a busy mom and you're a busy corporate professional, female business owner, whatever it is, you come to me because you want to get shit done. And I'm going to help you get shit done in the category of losing body fat, while you still maintain the schedule that you have, the social life that you want. There will be a time and a place for making certain decisions, but at the same time, it's like, can we just make that next best decision rather than sitting there being like, oh, why did I do that thing? Right. Or, oh, I just throw my hands up in the air and I can't do this. And that's really what it all comes down to. And is kind of like a very perfect way of bringing us back around to the first thing you said about entrepreneurship and about your job and how you see yourself and the role that you have and the impact that you have in the world, to say, can I just point somebody like 2 more degrees in the right direction? Because that's really kind of what we're saying here, right? In making the next best decision for someone who has constantly always chosen the path that seems frictionless in the sense that it is door dashing or ordering the food, the 2-degree switch from that can actually feel kind of hard for them. The same way with what we're describing for business owners. So to piece all of this together and to round out this conversation, I'd love to ask you, one, is there anything else that you want to share? But to me, the one other question that comes up is just in terms of what you described about AR, and for any coaches listening, of course, I'd love for you to give us the details on what it is that you're building for them. We've referenced GHL a few times. And for the listeners who aren't sure what that is, it's a CRM system. I happen to use it. So for everybody who's on my email list that gets my daily emails, it's coming through that system. It's a great platform. And Mike and I coincidentally both use it, but he's the real expert on it. So I'd love for you to just share what it is that you're actually doing for coaches.
Man, loaded question.
Yeah.
Because I can say, hey, I'm trying to change lives, or I can get technical.
You can tell us both. Go for it.
The first thing I'm trying to do is change somebody's understanding of you can't have a client without a lead. So stop trying to get clients to focus on getting leads.
Love that.
Understanding what a funnel is. A funnel is nothing more than, in my mind, giving something away for free in exchange for somebody's data, name, number, and email. Just like the same as on an e-commerce website when they give you 15% off for a name, number, and email, you're going to do the same, except it's going to be your value. Ebook, set your macros to free, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Free value. From there, understanding that if you're the person that says, if I can just talk to them, I can sell them, because you've been doing that in person for years, or because you're really good at selling yourself because that's what you've had to do your entire life as a coach, then your objective is to get a name, number, and email, not a client. And so give enough free value away to make that exchange. Ensure that they got the free thing by texting them, and then ask them, would they like to learn more about things like that? Make the close, and then ensure that you fulfill on that and your promise in which you gave them. So for us, we build out automated lead funnels, essentially creating the link in bio through GHL. We call it AR. We are a company that uses them. We're as an agency. We build everything out for our coaches, done for you. We work with 232 active coaches right now. We have about a coach a day that sign up with us. And the idea is going from link in bio to form to the automated text messages that allow you to start the conversation, which then goes to a two-way conversation once they respond. And then the whole calendar system that you're going to use, the automations they're going to use coming up to the call, to close them, closing through the software, and then going through your check-in process and then putting them into Trainerize or Everfit or whatever it is that you use as your management platform. Focusing on trying to get leads over clients, because you can't have a client without a lead. Also makes you show up differently. If I said, hey, for every client you get, you have 2 sales calls and you close 1 out of 2, 50% close rate. Well, for you to get 2 calls booked, you got to talk to 10 people that gave you their telephone number. So now when you wake up today, you don't go, how do I get 1 client? You go, how do I get 10 telephone numbers so I can get 2 book calls so that I can get 1 client? And now when you pump out content and you get on your story and talk, what can you give away to start a conversation? That's like, how great of something can you give away to start a conversation to get somebody's telephone number so that you can get 10? Because if that's the case and you just get 1 a day, every 10 days, you'll get a new client. Most people don't view it from that framework and that mindset.
No, they don't.
Coming from my background in e-commerce, it was all about conversion rates.
Sure. Makes sense.
Everything's conversion rate, because I have no opportunity to actually try and sell with my voice.
Right.
But most people don't take in the coaching space understanding what a conversion rate is. They think, well, I'll just post and people will come. And it's like, this isn't Field of Dreams. Like, just because you build it doesn't mean they're coming. We have to.
There's a lot of business owners who need to hear that.
Yeah. And if you don't know what Field of Dreams is, ask your parents or Google it. So that's what we essentially do, is building out that process and that understanding. And we feel like we've done such a great job at it that we work with other business coaches as well that send their clients to us to build out the funnels based on how they want them built. And so not only have we been able to, let's say, help the general population of coaches, we've also built a good enough customer support to have other people send us their clients to build it on their behalf. And that to me is the biggest pride piece that I love, because I'm getting recognized by my peers of providing such a great service that they're willing to trust us to build it for them.
I mean,
Which is
literally,
really
as soon
neat.
as you told me that you did that, I was like, oh, we got to have a bigger conversation. So, and I can say this, like, I want to attest to this. I have not had the chance to work with you one-on-one for my fitness business. And I set up a lot of what Mike is describing by myself. And I want everyone to get the visual. I remember this very vividly. It was like I switched over to GHL back in like November of October 2023. It was like right before Thanksgiving. I sat for 2 days straight and migrated my entire other CRM system and then built a lot of it from scratch. So if you are out there, especially for people who, as a business owner, if you do not enjoy the operational piece of your business, and it's okay for you not to enjoy that. I think that's something that a lot of people are afraid to accept for the reasons you described earlier of like becoming an expert in something. It's so worth to figure out who to partner with and collaborate with. And it's companies like AR that make that possible because, like you were saying, that will cause you to not take action because you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to take hours. And it did take me hours. And there's still things that I'm fine tuning on it that I know if I just asked you, you'd have the answer for me in 30 seconds. So long term, where I see this becoming a way for me to continue to support other coaches that I support, and why I really wanted you to come on the show is because very candidly, like I see a direct use case for this with the people that I work with, who I'm helping them on the language, the content, the marketing piece of it. It's like, hey, let's get all of that right, because then we're simultaneously getting support from somebody like yourself. It's like, now you built something in weeks and months that could have taken you a couple of years to do by, on your own or with a very small team.
If you're like me, you can do it yourself. The difference is that, do you want to take 10 years to make 6 figures?
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
So it's kind of one of those things to where it's everybody can learn it. However,
you can.
Most people take 6 months and it's going to be half as what it needs to be.
Right.
And so there's an opportunity cost. There's a frustration cost. I have too many clients to even worry about building this thing, or it's like, I don't have any
That's very real.
clue to how to do anything. Right. And so we have two different types of clients. First clients are like, I struggle with getting leads and I don't have a framework. I don't have a structure. I don't have a funnel. I just hope people DM me and I have an application. Great. We can optimize and make that better. If you can post on social media, we can teach you how to do the rest. The second client are the ones that usually never leave. And I say usually never because we've had 4 people that have quit using our platform if you do over 10 grand a month. And the reason is because you don't have the time to build it out and you want it built correctly in the first place. You don't want to have to go through the trial and errors, because we're setting up SMS, email, calendar system, check-in process, landing page, forms, funnels, workflows, pipeline. It's a lot of stuff.
It's a lot.
And so for us, like, we're going to spend 4 hours of like truly dedicating on building
to just that,
to build it.
Yeah.
More or less, you having to learn how to do it and then build it and then go, oh, wait, the thing I built actually doesn't work at all. I need to go back and start over because of this, that, whatever.
Yeah. Or
so
find
it just allows
like
you
the
to
one step that was wrong that you need to fix. Because I've been there. Yeah.
And so now we help these essential, like these higher level coaches give back their time. And so not only are we going to optimize what you're doing, but also save you a ton of time by putting the automation into place that are going to help you send over, your onboarding emails and contracts and text messages, setting up the calendar system to where you can have automated text messages go to your clients, reminding them so that they don't forget about your calls or no-shows. Having to be able to automatically reach out to people that fill out applications. You don't have to manually reach out to everybody that fills out your type form.
That one's huge.
It's huge, especially for a coach that's finding some success.
Yeah.
And so, or also like, we do the same features as mini chat where it's like comment the keyword. And by doing that, we can put them into the system and have conversations there. And so we have different pain points for different types of coaches. But we do find the more success with those that are a little bit more experienced on running the business because, well, if you're like, I want to start a business, it's like, you don't know what entrepreneurship is yet. And it's about consistency and eating, for many months before something actually happens. And so, that's essentially what we do. And hopefully that helps explain it a little bit.
Perfect. Well said. I appreciate it. Well, very last question. If somebody could only take away one thing from what we've talked about today,
It's always
what would
the
it
same.
be?
It's always the same.
What would it be? I was like, he's got a good answer for this. So I have
Always
to
the
ask.
same. Before I do that, I just want to say thank you for having me on.
Of
For every
course.
those that find any type of value from anything that Krista puts out, please go wherever essentially you're listening to this. Give it a 5-star, give it a like, share
Thank you.
it. You guys don't understand how hard it is to show up every day and do these type of things. And it means a lot from the littlest thing. So if you can show support by posting, liking, commenting, giving her a review, it would mean the world to her. And she is too humbled to ask.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. It does mean a lot. And it is something that you have to remind yourself as a business owner, plug it. And I do make an effort to say, hey, please share the show. But I do appreciate it coming from the guest too. So thank you.
Of course. The number one thing that I always say that I want everybody to always do is, am I changing my mind here? I think I'm changing it. I'm changing it.
Okay.
Based on our
Go for
conversation
it.
today,
We get a hot take.
you get a hot take. This is my first speech I ever gave. You have two options. You can want or you can worry. The difference between wants and worries is going to be two sides of the paper. You can't want a husband and also worry about him cheating on you. You can't want to lose weight, but also worry about missing social events. I need you to pick and choose what it is you actually want to do. And if there's anything on the list that you want to accomplish in your life or that you want in your life at this very moment, those things go on one side and the things you worry about are on the other side. The more time you will spend on the wanting side, then the less anxiety you will have about the worried side. And anything that's on that want side, can you accomplish it today? That's a really big piece because sometimes we put so much off in the future. I'll be happy when. Just to give you an example of what mine were, I worked through somebody with this in some counseling. And one of the things I put down was my 5 things is that I wanted a great team. I wanted to live in Florida. I wanted to enjoy coffee with a view. I wanted to laugh more, and I wanted to love more. And to me, it's emotional a little bit, so bear with me. I thought to myself, what a pathetic list of wants. And my wife said, it sounds like you have just about everything as you want. And for me, it was like, I want to laugh more. Like, you should probably do that. I want to love more. Like, what am I doing to make that happen? I can't enjoy my coffee with a view. Does it have to be on the beach to enjoy a cup of coffee with a view? Can it just be grateful for the fireplaces in my house? Or can it be grateful for the sun that I get to see? Like, am I enjoying it? Like, why am I not enjoying my cup of coffee? Like, where's my gratitude in my life?
Yeah.
And so you start to play these things out and go, how can I start accomplishing what I want? It's not all about the Ferraris. It's not all about the Lambos and all these really big things. But start tackling things that you want to accomplish because the things you want aren't just going to show up on their own. I always make the joke, like the plane is not just going to show up in your driveway. You got to really put the plan into place to make that happen.
Yeah.
However, it all starts with the little things too. So whatever you've got going on that you want to accomplish, like go do the thing. Like take the guitar lesson. Like do the little things that you're going to find joy in, because if you only want big things, then you actually will, I don't think, ever find true happiness, because you're just going to pick a bigger thing. So see what you can start accomplishing today on what it is you want and leave the worrying in the past.
That's a mic drop. I'm kind of glad you switched. I don't know what you were going to say, but we're going to leave it with that one because that is a great exercise for everyone. Seriously, we talked to you about taking action, right? So there you go. There's the first assignment for you to be able to take action and execute on something. To me, what I was hearing in some of those wants, I interpret that as an intention to be more present for those smaller moments in your life. So I love that. I resonate so much with that. And this conversation has just been really wonderful. And really, I'm so grateful for all the guests that we get on this show. And just having this platform, that's been one of my greatest loves of podcasting is we may have not connected otherwise, if you really think about it, right? Mm-hmm. So I love that about this industry. And I love that about being a podcaster. So thank you so much again for your time. I'm excited for the feedback from the FYX listeners on this one. And you heard Mike, give us the feedback. We're looking for it, but it does mean a whole lot for the for the 5-star review, to share it with a friend. If you know somebody in your life who wants to start a business, it doesn't even have to be fitness and nutrition related, but if they want to do something that's going to inspire them to take action, listening to this podcast episode is, in my humble opinion, a very good place to start. So appreciate your insights and your perspective. And to everybody who tuned into this episode from wherever you're listening from, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will catch you next week. Thanks, Mike.